Why, hi. How's it going? It's been a while since I've done a video. I go through these very long bouts of a lack of motivation. It's just something that I've tried to put up with, but I took a hiatus from Vanguard, and I came back to it right at a decent time. The meta's been pretty easy going. The whole Excel mess that was going on is kind of calmed down, and now we're kind of back at a point where Vanguard is a little more healthier, at least in my opinion. I've enjoyed it a bit more, and now I can finally start putting out more content. And the first thing I want to start out with was a deck that I was working on while I was working on my main deck, and that is a Claret sword deck that we're going to talk about today. So, really quick heads up. I can't get this chair I'm sitting in to shut up. It's just every time I move, it just kind of makes a noise. So I apologize. I talk a lot with my hands, so it's gonna be squeaking. I'm very sorry. But anyway, if you can put up with that, hopefully you can enjoy this deck profile, and we're just gonna jump right into it. So Claret Sword is a new deck that has just hit the scene, and well, I shouldn't say just. It's been out for a few months, but physically, in physical card form, I think it's pretty much just hit the scene, but it's been really interesting to play with because our previous Shadow Paladin decks have kind of taken this very interesting phase of evolution. It's taken on this very different take on how the deck plays every single time since Standard has begun, because they started out with Phantom Blaster, where it was just kind of like this very aggressive sort of control deck. Then it shifted off to Gust Blaster, where it was just like a full-on aggression deck. Then it went to Mordred, where it was aggressive, but rather than going, tall and down the middle with Gust, it went like very wide. And so centering back down to it being like a very Vanguard-centered, heavy-hitting deck with a restanding Vanguard has been a very interesting change of pace, and I've really, really, really enjoyed it. Claret Sword was a card that I really didn't get to enjoy when he first came out during G, because at the time I was just broke as hell and I just couldn't afford to play him, so I didn't get to enjoy him very much, but I always had an admiration for the card. I love the art, I loved his lore. I was just a very big fan of Claret, and now that he's back out and actually has some relevancy, I've been really eager to test him out, and I am in love with this deck. I think that even though I tend to not really gravitate towards Shadow Paladins, I've never liked anything else but this. This deck suits a playstyle that I don't normally go to. I mean, as we all know, I'm a big Mega Colony fan, and I've always been into control, sort of twisty, turny, very out of the, thinking outside the box decks, and going back into something that is aggressive as this has been a very interesting change of pace, and I really, really, really adore this card. So my build, I will say right now, is a little bit different, a little bit off the beaten path because of just the way that I've preferred to play it, and I'm going to go and explain that as we adventure on through it. But so, to start out, we have obviously our starter, which is the same as every other starter, Promising Knight David. I am legally obligated to run this card because I share a name with it, so I kind of have to. But obviously there's nothing in here that interacts with the starter, so run whatever you want. So our one and only grade 3 is going to be for Claret Sword. I don't know if this needs a ton of explaining, because I think if anybody knows the common Claret Sword build, this is pretty much how it goes. Not many cards actually synergize very well with him, and the few that do are a bit more of a player's choice kind of deal, and it's hard to find something that synergizes with him to the point of being able to be ridden, and that's the biggest thing. So Claret Sword is a very aggressive card. This card wants to wrap up the game as soon as possible. And I know technically every deck wants to do that. This guy kind of hits the ground running a little bit harder than the average deck, and that's what I really enjoy about him. So without question, obviously you want to have Force 2 with this card. That's the biggest recommendation that I can give you, is that obviously Force 2 is the one and only Force marker you want to be using with this guy. So the skill is on ride, check your top 3, and then take any grade 1s that are among them and put him in the drop zone. Shuffle the rest back. He'll gain 10,000 for every card that was discarded. So obviously, ideally you want to get one more is going to be excellent, obviously, but you typically want to hit at least one, because when he's swinging with a 13k base, it's not excellent. You definitely lose a lot of your aggression that I've found, and it just tends to be a very lackluster turn at that point. And all this leads up to his final skill, which is after he attacks, bind 7 grade 1s from a drop zone, restand him, he loses a drive. So he's very easy to get off. That is the biggest thing to put out there, is that because we run in excess of grade 1s in this deck, and because the grade 1s in Shadow Paladin are typically a lot better than other grade 1s in other decks, I've noticed, they all seem to be around this whole purpose of being expendable, so they're making sure that they are getting, that you as a player are getting the most use out of them as such an expendable card, has really given them a lot of ingenuity in themselves and allowed us to run in excess of them. I think at the end I had like either 19 or 20 in the final build. I want to say 19 is the final number I wound up settling on, but so really there isn't too much to say about him in general, because most of the like tactics and most of the play longevity and everything that would be considered to be difficult and worth breaking down is in the grade 2s and lower. But if there's anything to say about him, is that obviously he does come out the gate swinging. You want to get his skill off by the first turn you have him. Going first in this deck is ideal, because you have a very aggressive grade 2 turn. Next turn, right into him. If your opponent is anywhere between 3 and 4 damage, that's usually a pretty decent spot to be able to finish them off. This guy's swinging for 2 crits twice. That doesn't count the drive checks that you can pass off to your rear guards. Your rear guards get pretty big. And overall, Claret Sword is just a very decent aggressive card. And with Shadow Paladin support that I think we're getting later on this year, I kind of look forward to seeing if they give him anything else, like if we get like Aura Geyser or any of his other extended forms. I would like to see them branch off on this concept and maybe give him a bit more of like a security blanket to ride into if you don't finish off your opponent with the turn that you use him, because that is one big thing to say about this deck, is that the second grade 3 turn that you have with him is not quite as fruitful as the original one. It's definitely a little more messy and has, I would say, a little more of like a sloppy build-up is, I guess, the way I'd put it. And we'll talk a bit more about that as we go into the cards. But so yeah, that's about it. There is another grade 3 that you can run with this guy. He is a non-markered grade 3 that you kind of must 1, retire 2 units, call a unit from the drop zone that is a grade equal to or lower to the combined grade of the 2 units that you retired, and then they both gain 10k. So that's really nice for like filling up your grave. And we kind of have what I have began to call like controlled demolition, and that just means that rather than using these skills that we'll talk about later that mill, I tend to want to push the idea that the discard skills and the retire skills are the best ones, because they don't risk getting rid of combo pieces, getting rid of triggers, etc. So he's a really good card to run. I did take him out for a tech that I run personally in my own unique take on this deck, and so I personally don't run him, but I think his name's like Badadin or Bethadin, something like that. But if you would need a recommendation of what to run along with him, that is a very excellent card. I wish I had a copy on me to show right now, but I do not. But anyway. So, grade 2s, we have 4 Morion's Spear Dragon. Interestingly enough, one of our main support cards is actually a card that didn't come out until his second wave of support, like years later. But so Morion is what I would consider to be your main grade 2. And it's a very solid ability, and this is back again to what that controlled demolition kind of thing, where we're building up our resources with a very coordinated and less sloppy approach. So his ability is Soul Blast 1, which immediately that Soul Blast is your grade 1 ride target, so that's immediately 1 free 1 in the graveyard there. Again, you want to hit 7. So you Soul Blast 1, discard a card, draw a card. If the card, he gains 5k, and then if the card you discarded was a grade 1, he'll actually gain 10k instead. So 9 times out of 10, he's a 20k swinger. Really, that's all there is to say about him, but he is going to be your main grade 2 rear guard. He hits for big numbers. He's a very aggressive Vanguard. However, we're going to talk about that in a little bit here because, again, I've kind of jazzed things up a little bit in my build. But, yeah, I mean, really there isn't too much to say about him. He's just a very nice aggressive card. And then we have his partner in crime, which is going to be 3 Dark Pride Dragon. So, Dark Pride is typically ran at 4. There's a good reason why I don't run him at 4. Again, just kind of a different approach I've taken to the deck. And he goes back to the more sloppy take on how to get your grade 1s to the drop zone. So his ability is, on placement, Vanguard or Rearguard, he gains 5k. You mill your top 3. If any grade 1s are among them, counterblast 1 and draw a card. I like him in concept. I don't like that he can potentially ruin the entire game for you if he does not go off properly. I've had games where he's milled in excess of my other grade 3 Clarets, he's milled off grade 2s, he's milled off just straight triggers. You can absolutely flop on this card, and it doesn't mean he's a bad card, because I think he's a very solid, good card, and I think for what he does, he is very useful. The problem is that I tend to wait and use him until the second Claret turn. And that's just because the second Claret turn, you have gotten rid of all your resources at that point. You are going to have... I mean, if you have any grade 1s left after Claret has gone off, it's going to be like maybe 1 or 2. If you have any more than that, you've gotten extremely lucky. And so I typically save these guys for later on in the game. Again, I did knock him down to 3 for the tech I'm going to talk about in a little bit here. And if you can't tell, I'm very nervous about how the tech is going to be received because, obviously when people go a little bit off the beaten path, it's just a little more of a sensitive subject, I guess. But typically the average build is literally just 4 Claret, 4 Dark Pride, and 4 Morion, and then like nothing else in like your grade 2 and 3 lineup. However, there is another card that I have typically started to run, and that is 3 Blaster Dark. So, why the Blaster Dark? I mentioned before, this deck comes out the gate swinging. It wants to be as aggressive as possible. You want to finish off your opponent as soon as possible. And the first thing I thought about was, damn, it would be nice to ride Blaster Dark as a Vanguard. And that is where we wound up landing with this card. And I can tell you that from the games I have played, from the numerous matchups against numerous decks, I mean, in all types of climates and situations, there's never been a single time where I have regretted using this card as a mainstay grade 2. Now, obviously, we are extending our grade 2 count past a point of comfortability, but I made sure that what I did take out didn't eat into the important resources. So I did take out my extra grade 3, 1 Dark Pride, and then 1 grade 1. So at least that, when I was making space, it didn't absolutely, diminish my chances of hitting like the important cards. But so Blaster Dark, as we all know, has this grade 2 ability, or this Vanguard ability where you can discard a card, which is again back to controlling your resources and getting cards to the grave in a more controlled way. You discard a card, and if your opponent has no rear guards, he will gain Twin Drive. So far, really, I don't run into a lot of opponents that fill their field, because if he doesn't go off, you're in a very rare situation where either your opponent is on grade 1 and they've either overcalled because they know that you run him. Doesn't happen really at all, but I would say the only time that does happen is with the very few people who know that I play this and are expecting it, so they're willing to just dish out their hand so I don't get it. To me, that's a plus. If your opponent is going to have an excessive field that early in the game, that usually means that their hand is pretty low, and that also leaves them vulnerable for your aggressive plays. However, if they don't, which because typically they won't, this guy going off with Twin Drive is amazing. In a deck like this, where you are swinging, where your next turn is going to be this guy swinging for 2 crits twice, accompanied by drives, and then whatever your rear guard bulk has been, this guy going off with the Twin Drive is phenomenal, and I actually cannot recommend this card enough. Now, of course, variety is a spice of life. Everybody can run this deck in any way they want, and this is not me saying that this is the choice, or it will drastically improve your experience. This is just how I have approached this deck and what I have found to really work for me. You don't have to try this out. However, if you are finding yourself looking for a little bit of a different take on your build, I do recommend giving him a shot. You don't necessarily have to run him at 3. I wound up pumping him up to that because I want more of a chance to ride him, and 4 is just a bit too much. And then when I bumped it down to 2 and kept one of the grade 1s in the deck, he didn't come up quite as often as I wanted him to. So I bumped him up to that. You can discard him with Morion, you know, if you get more of him in your hand, because obviously as a rare grade, he doesn't have a ton of presence. And another thing to note is that your Counterblast are rarely used. You only really have, you know, Dark Pride, Claret, and Swordbreaker. Each one has a Counterblast 1 ability. This may, you know, on average is only going to go off once a game. Like I mentioned before, I don't typically use Dark Pride unless I am absolutely hurting for grade 1s during my first Claret turn, or my grade 2, my second grade 3 turn has come along, and I, again, am desperate to get those in the graveyard as quickly as possible because I know I'm not going to survive past that. Because if there's one thing to really say about this deck is that it doesn't hold on to defensive resources very well. It's going to have just enough to get you to your grade 3 turn, and maybe just enough to get you to your second. And so being able to like control your opponent's resources again by calling this and like killing off a rear guard is also icing on the cake. But typically this is just again to just have more aggression on the grade 2 turn, because again your grade 2 turn is, I wouldn't say it's important, it's not crucial or pivotal, but it is definitely extremely helpful if you're able to get something like this off, because again, I mean, that's a very huge jump on your opponent, because again, if they're at 4 or 3 damage, that is the sweet spot that you need for Claret to be able to finish off your opponent. And I adore this tech, and I adore it even more that it was signed by my the guy who sold this deck to me, which was somebody who, in quick story time, you can totally just jump later. You know, I like to ramble, but you can totally just jump ahead and into the next part here. But there used to be a Yu-Gi-Oh! Live action series called Card Heroes, and I mean, it was great when I was like 15. It was just people that got together with a camera and some editing software and like recorded themselves with duels and like superimposed the images of the cards and everything, and I adored it as like a teenager. And the person that made it was the person that sold me the deck, and we got to reminiscing about Card Heroes, and he was super excited to meet somebody that knew about it, and he signed the card both as himself and as the character, and I just low-key adore this card, and you know, this is one of those sentimental things I'm going to hold on to for quite a while. So thank you again. If you're ever watching this, I very much appreciate you making my day and doing that, and also and making me a really great deal on this deck. So anyway, let's jump further into the deck and get to the grade 1s, because I've rambled on quite enough. But so for grade 1s, we have 4 blue Espada Dragon, which is another card that came along in Claret's second bout of support that I'm surprised to see. Not that I'm complaining. He is a beautiful, beautiful card. So this is another great example of a card that can actually hurt you quite a bit, and another reason why I tend to not use Dark Pride until the second grade 3 turn. So Blue Spotted Dragon has 2 really solid abilities, but they do, again, push that very sloppy kind of mill mechanic this deck has in there as a bit of like a bouncing factor. On placement, Vanguard or Rearguard, check your top 3. If you have a Morion or a Claret among them, you can add it to your hand. Now, I can't remember, is that just one of them, or is that both? Yeah, up to 1, so you can only add 1, but I mean, odds are you're not going to hit both. I haven't anyway. But, so you search for one of them off your top 3, add it to your hand, you mill the rest, which means if you don't get either, that's all going to the drop. And I don't tend to love the way this ability works. However, it is a bit of a necessary evil, and again, why I tend to not use Dark Pride until a bit later on. But a secondary ability is after you do that, if you have 5 or more grade 1s in the drop, he'll gain 10k, so he's an 18k booster / attacker, which is a huge help in this deck. Not much to say here, but I will say a big recommendation is that if you are going to ride him as your starting, grade 1 Vanguard, put him off first, or have him go off first, then draw off your starter, just to have a little bit left in your deck, for that search. I've actually had, I seem to have this very persistent level of bad luck where I will draw into a Claret or Morion off the starter, search with him and get nothing. I just want to have it minimize the chance of you hitting something dead and then milling off like triggers or whatever. To me, I just feel like he's good. He's a necessary evil, but he's definitely going to run the potential of or run up the chances of the potential of you again milling out your triggers, milling out your grade 2 lineup, you know, just hitting those things you don't normally want to hit. Now if they are grade 1s, that's fine, but again, you have 16 cards in this deck that can be hit by him, and it hurts. It is basically where that rambling is going to. It really hurts. We also have 4 Nemen. She's a fantastic card. I love this. I'm kind of glad that they nerfed her just a little bit, but if you don't know what she does, which I don't think many people really do, I don't think many people don't know what she does, but rest her, call a grade 1 from the deck, or no, sorry, you can rest her and then call a card from your deck that is 5k power. It's just resources. You have her and 2 other targets in this deck that can be, you know, caught up by it. I typically tend to forego using her until I've gotten off all of my, like, Dark Pride and Morion and Espada turns during that turn, because I don't want to, like, waste that resource. And what you'll catch yourself doing a lot, and again, we're going back to how this deck can cause you to be a little sloppy. Sometimes, typically, you will rest her, call out something, do what you can with it if you need to, more so, like, you know, Swordbreaker, and then call over the card you just called with something you're going to place out. So, like, rest her, call a target, do what you need to with the target, and then call over that target with, like, one of your grade 2s or whatever, because you want to fill. I'm going to hit that, you know, that grade 1 count for 7. One thing really worth mentioning is you can only use her once a turn now, which is her little errata nerf that she got. But I mean, she's an amazing card. She's fantastic. You know, what is there really to say about her? She's a staple in Shadow Paladins for a reason. We then have our new trend in clan support, which I really like, which is the Stride Fodder card that was, you know, previously in G, but now given to us as a 13k booster with, like, a search scale that I really, really enjoy. So, Branwyn is just on call or on ride, search your top 5. If there's a grade 3 among it, add it to your hand, and then discard 1. So, and then if you have, what, I think 3 or more grade 1s, you probably know this. Yeah, 3 or more grade 1s in your drop zone, she gains 5k. So, 13k booster, again, aggression is the name of the game, so she's fantastic at no matter where you put her. And we have a grade 1 that I see in some builds. I came to like him in mine, but he's kind of flip-floppy. How do you pronounce his name? Abogdo. So Abogdo is another very calm, collect, and neat way of getting grade 1s in your drop zone, and that is on attack, you can retire a grade 1, he gains 5k. On attack or boost, actually, I think. Yeah, right? Yeah, duh. Yeah, just want to make sure. It's like 5 a.m. I want to make sure I'm not messing this up. He gains 5k and becomes like a 13k attacker or booster. I mean, back to Braun. What I said about Brahman, it's just aggression's the name of the game. A 13k booster and or attacker is not unwelcome in this deck, and one that fills your grave with grade 1s is all the more welcome. And then we have 3 Blackwings, sword. Oh my god, I need to go to bed. Blackwinged Swordbreaker. So, on call, counterblast 1, draw a card. If it was called from your hand, she'll gain 5k along with that. Fantastic card. Resources, being able to plus off of Nemen's skill, and then while building your proper resources for your Claret turn, is just an amazing card. The only reason why I don't run her at 4 is because I teched in 1 extra grade 1 that I've really, 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 really enjoyed. And, I mean, I don't know what's just really much to say about her. She's just really good. And then we also have the one card that I don't actually see too often in these builds, but I've really come to like him, is Dead Armor Dragon. So Dead Armor is a one of for a couple reasons, and I'll explain that after his ability, but his ability is Soul Bust 1, retire him, again, controlled resource building. or controlled a controlled build up to Claret. He then gives your Vanguard the ability for that one attack where your opponent has to discard 2 or more cards to guard it. I really enjoy him because I mentioned before when we were talking about Claret Sword Dragon that if you don't hit any grade 1s off his top 3 ability, he kind of has a lackluster turn. Using this on that kicks it up a bit. Again, he's attacking twice, so dishing that into one of those 2 attacks is always ideal. If you have already hit 7, you can put it to his 1 drive ability. If you haven't, you can simply just retire him, add a little more girth to Claret Sword's ability, which means it's probably going to make that... Typically, what it's going to be doing is making that inevitable Perfect Guard you're going to face a little more costly for your opponent. And again, we're talking about these turns where you've done Blaster Dark early on, and you've put on tons of aggression, pumped tons of just power into your turns. Adding a little more insult to injury has always been fantastic for me, and I adore this card. I think it's a fantastic addition, and it's searchable, which is really good. It's a really easy to manage ability. The only reason why I'm running this at 1 is because you have no soul charge outlets aside from writing, and Morion is obviously a bit more of a priority. But typically you only really use 2 to 3 Morions a turn, the third being later on in the game whenever you've reridden over Claret. So you can... Usually I found the wiggle room to use this, and if not, I mean, it's a fodder at that point. You can get rid of it. It's just a grade 1 that you can dish out. So that is it for the grade 1 count. And again, I think it's like 19. But 20 to 19 is usually like the typical one. I've seen people run a bit less, a bit more. It kind of varies. And now we're on to our trigger lineup. So obviously, if you couldn't tell because I don't run the grade 1 Perfect Guard, we are running 8 crits, 4 draw, and 4 heal. So really the only thing to talk about is the draw triggers. And a typical choice in Claret is to... I wouldn't say typical. I think it's like 50-50, pretty much split between the Claret fans. It's typical to run the grade 1 Perfect Guards. It kicks up your grade 1 count. It lets you run 12 crits for like a lot of aggression. And that was my first take with this build. My first couple drafts of this build ran those grade 1 Perfect Guards. However, it breaks down to how you want to play this deck, because both are viable. It's just how you want to approach the deck. Running the grade 1 count where you're running 12 crits is highly aggressive, but it has almost 0 defense, because those Perfect Guards get milled, discarded, done away with, however it's going to happen, quite a bit. And it leaves you with very little defense and very little resource building and very little maneuverability with this deck. And it kind of makes a deck just a little more linear and one-track minded. And that to me wasn't great. 12 crits are always a fantastic thing, and it's always great to have that much aggression in your deck. But to me, I didn't like that. I felt very like claustrophobic in concept. So you run the draws because it gets resources to your hand for off damage triggers. These Perfect Guards obviously are going to be staying in your hand. They're going to give you more defense. And I know the biggest worry people have is, well, you're going to deck out. And again, no, because part of playing this deck, and especially if you want to play this deck and actually like commit yourself to it, sounds a little more extreme. If you want to play this deck more often and you want to learn how to use it properly, you're going to learn to pick and choose these moments when you are using the mill skills. And I've talked about it all throughout this deck profile. The mill skills can be very sloppy. They can be very beneficial, but they can also be very sloppy. And you don't want to overuse them. If you are the type of player that is just like, Dark Pride, Espada, like, that's not good. That's not what you should be doing, and that, yes, will lead to you milling out. If you're careful, if you're doing the calculated, like, Morion turns, if you are calling out things with Nemen and then calling over those cards, if you're discarding again, like I have, like, think with things like Blaster Dark, etc., and you're only using Dark Pride and sometimes Espada's a bit harder to put into this comparison, but because he has an 18k booster thing going for him. Either way, if you are using the mill cards sparingly, you are not going to mill out. And ever since I got a hang of that, and ever since I got like a good idea of how to avoid overusing those abilities and over relying on them, I stopped milling out and I stopped having that problem. The last time I milled out actually was against Angel Feather, and that was because they just were able to keep continuously healing and healing and healing and healing and healing, and it was more of a grind game and more of a matchup specific thing. And even then, I don't really blame the deck for that, because some games just drag, and unfortunately that game just did, so that's what happened. But in a typical healthy paced game, and especially when you have learned these abilities and learned how to use them more sparingly, you don't mill out, and these certainly aren't going to make you mill out. So that's where I stand on it. You can absolutely run the 12 crit variants. I don't think it's bad. I'm not, this is me saying, like, don't run it, don't use it. This is just my take on it and how I landed to the conclusion that this was better for me as a player. And, at the end of the day, that's really all I can do is tell you how I landed here and, the what's, whens, and whys of my experience. But you are always welcome to try out this deck in any variant you want yourself. And that's about it for the deck profile. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. I'm always up for talking out my builds with other people, of course, as long as the dialogue is civil. I'm not here to argue with people. You can run the deck in any way you want, but if you have any questions about how you'd like to run the deck, or any changes you would personally like to make or are considering, please let me know. I've been playing this deck quite a bit and I really, really, really do enjoy it. But obviously, if you are a mainstay on my channel, one of the very few people that know me, you'll know that Mega Colony is my main deck, and that is coming out. Waiting on some stuff in the mail, but I do have a very long-winded Mega Colony deck profile coming out very soon. So when that happens, we will see. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Also, please be careful and please stay safe out there. I work for a hospital, and I can tell you right now that this virus thing is no joke. It's not a pleasant experience, and please stay safe and please be responsible. And most of all, just be healthy. Good luck, guys. Have a good one.